Hi guys, and welcome back to class. Today we are going to be starting a new novel. The novel is called Claudette Colvin, Twice Toward Justice. Here you can see the cover of the book here. If you have not checked out your novel, please make sure that you come up to the school to check those out because our assignments will begin in the text for this week. I will have some recordings uploaded for you guys to get you through. But please make sure that you make arrangements to come and get the book for the upcoming lessons. So first we're going to start off with a question. I want us to ask ourselves, what are some of the ways that people try to make the world a better place? I want you to brainstorm some of the ways that people try to make the world a better place and share them out inside of the discussion board that is inside of Schoology. To begin today's lesson, and for this new module, our focusing question is, what motivated Claudette Colvin? And our content framing question for lesson 1 in our wonder stage is, what do I notice and wonder about Claudette Colvin, Twice Towards Justice? Our craft question in lesson 1 in our examine stage is, why is asking research questions important? So first, what I want us to do is to record the word motivation and its definition inside of your journals. The definition of motivation, and the word is a noun, means the reason or cause that prompts someone to do something, the condition of being excited or passionate about what you are doing. Some of its synonyms is inspiration, having incentive, having enthusiasm, or having drive. Thinking about this word, why might it be valuable to consider how teens create change? Through studying a nonfiction book, Claudette Colvin, Twice Toward Justice, and conducting independent research about the topic, because you all will be working on a research paper for your end of module task, in this first focusing question sequence, you will begin your examination of a teenage girl who created change and explored her motivations for doing so. So let's go ahead and get started. So we're on chapter 1, and I want us to pay attention to the epigraph. The epigraph that you're going to see is going to be on the first page. And the epigraph is one by Martin Luther King Jr. And it says, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere." Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. So let's look at this epigraph. Then I want us to flip to the next page and locate the next epigraph. It's right up underneath chapter 1, Jim Crow and the Destined number 10. And it says, "I swear to the Lord, I still can't see why democracy means everybody but me." Langston Hughes. What do you think this text will be about based on these two epigraphs? So looking at these two epigraphs, here's an epigraph here. Here's another epigraph here. What do you think the text is going to be about looking at these two epigraphs? Now I want you to look back at the text, and I want you to notice and look around for what text features do you notice in Claudette Colvin, Twice Towards Justice. So one thing that I notice is it says chapter 1, and then it says Jim Crow and the Detested number 10. So I notice that there's titles. I also notice that there's pictures. What else do you notice for text features that you look at as you're looking throughout the book? Just kind of skim it. You're not supposed to read it all the way through, but just what kind of text features do you notice offhand? So today we're going to be reading a short passage from the text. We're going to start at the beginning, and we are going to read until we get to page 3. As I am reading, I want you to ask yourself, what do you notice and wonder about Claudette's opening story? And what do you notice and wonder about life during Jim Crow? Claudette Colvin was about 4 years old the first time I ever saw what happened when you acted up to whites. I was standing in line at the general store when this little white boy cut in front of me. Then some older white kids came in through the door and started laughing. I turned around to see what they were laughing at. They were pointing at me. The little white boy said, let me see too." For some reason, they all wanted to see my hands. I held my hands up, palms out, and he put his hands up against mine. Touched them. The other kids doubled up laughing. My mother saw us, and she saw that the boy's mother was watching. Then my mom came straight across the room, raised her hand, and gave me a backhand slap across the face. I burst into tears. She said, "Don't you know you're not supposed to touch them?" The white boy's mother nodded at my mom and said, "That's right, Mary." That's how I learned I could never touch another white person again. So, looking at that first portion, what do you notice and wonder about Claudette's opening story? And what do you notice and wonder about life during Jim Crow? Now, on the following page, you should see a text box at the bottom of page 4. It says, "Who was Jim Crow?" I want you to read this portion and ask yourself, how does this text box develop the information presented in the main text? Now looking at the word segregation. Segregation means legal, forced separation of people or communities based on race. Please record this inside of your journals. Now continuing to read, I want you to ask yourself, what do you notice and wonder about Claudette Colvin Twice Toward Justice? What do you notice and wonder about Claudette Colvin as a person? And now that you've read the opening of the book, what do you notice about the purpose of an epigraph? What role does it play in building your understanding of the text so far? Now on to our craft writing. In our craft question for today, in our examine stage, we're going to be asking ourselves, why is asking research questions important? So first, in order to answer this question, I want us to ask ourselves, what does researchable even mean? Which one of these questions is researchable? So looking at these two questions right here, which one of these two questions are researchable? So we have, how old was Claudette Colvin in 1955? And we have, how did the segregation affect teens in the 1950s? So, here are two more questions. What was life in Alabama during the 20th century like? And what was life like for Black people between the ages of 12 and 13 in Montgomery on November 10th, 1955? So looking at these two questions, we want to make sure that a researchable question is the right size, not so narrow that you can't answer it. So for instance, this question right here is very narrow. It would be really hard to find information about a specific age range because a lot of people may not have written about the ages of 12 through 13. They may have written about what life was like for Black people in general in Montgomery, but they may not be able to pinpoint exactly what life was like on a particular day or what life was like at a particular age. So this would be a very hard researchable question for you to find the answer to because it's so narrow. But if I take out the words 12 and 13, and if I take out the date, then I would be left with the question here, which would say, what was life like for Black people life like for Black people in Montgomery? This would be a researchable question. It's not so narrow that you won't be able to find information, but it's broad enough to where there'll be a lot of articles about it. So you want to make sure that when you're researching a question, that the question is actually researchable. Now to end this lesson, And our content framing question for this lesson is in our wonder stage. What do I notice and wonder about Claudette Colvin twice toward justice? For tonight's homework, I want you to reread chapter 1 from Claudette Colvin, Twice Towards Justice, and annotate for facts about life during Jim Crow. Additionally, I would like for you guys to look up the word justifiable and its definition and be prepared to share out tomorrow in class. Now on to our vocabulary deep dive for today. Today we're going to be looking at verbals. So we're going to be looking at verbal refreshers. So verbals are verb forms that act as another part of speech. For example, even though it's a verb, it may act as an adjective or a noun or an adverb. Participles function as adjectives. Past participles are typically formed by adding the letters ed to the end of the verb. So for example, excited. So this word here would be a past participle. She looked out at the faces of her excited friends. Although there are some exceptions, such as chosen or burnt, you wouldn't say chose did or burnt did. That doesn't make sense. Those are not actual words. And the present participle, which means it's happening right now, are typically formed by adding ing to the end of the word, such as rising. So rising early each day, that means like you're doing that right now, which is why it says present participle to end of the verb. They usually appear next to the word that they modify. So when did she rise? Or when did you get up? In the day, you rose early. You were rising early each day. So this is modifying and giving me additional information about what time you actually got up. You rose early. You're rising early each day. He enjoyed a cup of coffee and time to read the newspaper. So now that we've had a brief refresher of verbals, I want us to look at infinitives. Infinitives function as nouns, adjectives, or adverbs. And infinitives are formed by placing to in front of the present tense verb. So for example, to read or to pick or to share, okay? Now, the only difference is they can function as different things. So when functioning as an adverb, infinitives tell readers why something is happening or why someone did something. So for example, to read is one of the life's greatest pleasures, or she refuses to read his essay. He left. Why? To pick up his cousin for the airport. I brought that dessert. Why? To share with the whole group. Okay, so this is kind of giving us an idea of why something is happening. So he left to pick up. Why did this happen? Because he needed to go and get someone from the airport. He brought a dessert. Why did this happen? Because he needed to share it with his whole group. So this will be an example of infinitives. Now on to gerunds. Gerunds are functions as nouns, and they end in ing. Now, a gerund can function in all the ways that nouns can function. It can be a subject, a direct object, an indirect object, a predicate nominative, or an object or preposition. So, for example, swimming is her true passion. Notice that it's ending in ing, and it's the subject of the sentence. What's her passion? Swimming. So that's the subject here. But in this one, it's a direct object. She prefers to do what? Read to talk with others. She prefers reading to talk with others. But here, the subject is she. So we're actually talking about her, but we're modifying that by adding what she actually likes to do. So now I want everyone to look at handout 1B, and you're going to underline the words that are not actually functioning as actions or as verbs, even though at first glance they may look like they are. For example, to separate or to keep. You're going to complete handout 1A and 1B and share our responses and your thinking. Verbals are important because if we know how a word is functioning, then that shows we fully understand the sentence. For example, without writing, the third sentence wouldn't be complete and it wouldn't have a subject. So for example, when we were looking at the sentences earlier, this sentence would not be complete if it did not have to read or swimming or reading. It wouldn't be complete without those. And also, since verbals act as nouns, adjectives, and adverbs, they give us very important information, like who is doing something and how they did it. And they also give us descriptive details. To end our vocabulary deep dive today, I want you guys to look at the second half of the title. So we have Claudette Colvin, Twice Towards Justice. So I want us to look at this portion of the title, which is telling us something important about the topic of the book. Using the following stem and House's title as a model, create a subtitle for verbals that convey something about their importance. Once again, if you need help, please come to office hours Monday through Friday, 11:22 to 12:06. And once again, please make sure that you pick up your novels and your workbooks from the school in order to complete your task.